Hello, everyone. What is up? Jordan Bates here. I am currently in the lovely city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, one of my favorite cities in the world. Truly love this city, truly love the energy. I find it very easy to love life here and just really savor all the delicious sensory experiences that are available to us all the time. Just absorbing the architecture and the trees and the sounds, listening to music, walking through the city. I love aimlessly walking through this city. And I just felt inspired to make a quick video just to say hello and send all the good vibes your way. I'm feeling really good today. Life's just a beautiful opportunity, and when you reorient from trying to control your life and trying to force things to happen the way you want them to happen, and instead you just start accepting whatever is happening and trusting that whatever is happening, you can either take the perspective that it's been designed to catalyze your personal flourishing or enlightenment, evolution, whatever, or you can just take the perspective that it can be used in that way. Every experience can be can be approached from the perspective of, what is the lesson here? What is this trying to show me? How is this strengthening me, refining me, making me more resilient? What can this teach me? How can this make me wiser? If you just take that perspective, almost any circumstance becomes much more bearable, and you really begin to realize that you're equipped to handle much more than you know. It doesn't seem that life really tends to give people things that they can't handle. It tends to give people things that they can handle. And yeah, I think if you just take the perspective, this kind of growth-oriented, student of life sort of perspective, like trust that life is trying to teach you something, consider what the lesson might be, and maybe it's trying to teach you that it's time to radically change things up in some way, and that if you're just recurringly miserable with whatever your current patterns are, then it's very likely that you need some kind of dramatic pattern disrupt to catalyze things in a new direction. But just accepting whatever comes, maintaining spaciousness. Spaciousness is just what a liberating concept this has been, and more so though than the concept, the actual embodied wisdom of spaciousness, when you start to be able to practice this. And what spaciousness is really is just feeling this broadening sense of space around your emotions and around events that are happening and around your reactions to those events, so that you're not just going through life reacting knee-jerkingly to everything. You've cultivated more presence and more slowness and tranquility and equanimity and awareness to be able to actually, as things happen, respond skillfully to reality, respond skillfully in the moment to reality. You can notice that an event has happened and that you have a default interpretation of the event, but you realize in a kind of fluid manner as you move through the world that your default interpretation of events is just one interpretation. It could very easily be inaccurate. It likely is. It almost certainly is inaccurate in some ways, and it's likely not the most optimal interpretation. And there are many interpretations. So when something happens, you experience life much less in sort of black and white terms, where it's like, oh, a good thing happened to me today. Oh, a bad thing happened to me today. It's like, no, more life happened, and life is ambiguous all the time. It's almost always contains elements of good and bad, although I don't know if life itself works within these categories. These are sort of a human imposition upon, and what I think of as a largely amoral process, as simply a flowing oceanic sort of river of being, and things simply are what they are. It is what it is. There's actually a lot of wisdom in this kind of folk adage. And so when you start to have that realization that events are ambiguous, there is no fixed interpretation, you free yourself from fixed interpretations, then you also begin to observe how your emotional energy responds to situations, and you begin to see that you have default emotional reactions, but you again realize that your default reaction is quite possibly inaccurate. It's based on a certain interpretation and a certain framework of feeling and meaning making, and it's very likely inaccurate. It's very likely suboptimal. It's very likely not the most skillful way to simply have that emotion come up and then express it in whatever default knee-jerk sort of way you would. It's likely, it's often the case that feeling the emotion, observing it, and then choosing to respond differently than your first reaction, or simply to not react or respond at all, to simply observe the emotion and let it pass, this is often a more skillful response to reality than simply living reactively. So living with spaciousness is kind of the opposite or the counterpoint to living reactively. Spaciousness, you just really have this feeling like you have this sort of protective bubble or shield around you, which is like the space in between events and reactions, and in between your emotional reaction and your actual response to that arising emotion. There's an increasing space there where you have more of an ability to choose how you respond to reality. And with this comes an increasing sense of freedom and an increasing sense of equanimity as you move through the world, an increased capacity to simply take things in stride, accept them as they are, free yourself from fixed reactive interpretations, and this just makes you more able to go with the flow, and grow with the flow, and simply flow along the kind of waves of life and kind of surf atop the waves of life rather than thrashing in the currents and getting angry about everything and thinking of everything as either good or bad, and getting offended and upset all the time. It's a much more pleasant existence to not do that, in my opinion. So just wanted to share that. And you might wonder, well, how do I cultivate this spaciousness? And it's beyond the scope of this video to go too much into detail about that, but I think the biggest thing is to practice, to start to think about this idea of spaciousness and begin to try to bring more awareness, more mindfulness, more wakefulness to all of your day-to-day events and interactions. Literally every day, almost every moment, is an opportunity to practice cultivating more awareness, because spaciousness really arises from an increase in conscious awareness of yourself and events, and an increased awareness of the ambiguity in everything. It's this recognition of ambiguity, this learning to softly kiss and embrace ambiguity, that begins to lead to ascending degrees of freedom from fixed interpretation. So you just practice at any time. This can become a form of meditation at any time, really, to just keep this idea of spaciousness in mind and kind of think, what would a spacious person do in this situation? What would a sage do in this situation? And sitting meditation can help you a lot in this regard as well. I personally think that entheogens, when used wisely and responsibly and in the proper context, can dramatically heighten spaciousness pretty rapidly by just giving you sort of allowing you to take a massive step back from your normal life and normal patterns and just get kind of a bird's eye, God's eye perspective on your whole life and realize, oh wow, that really changes the way I look at things, and now I can really see what people mean when they say that there are different ways to interpret reality and interpret the same thing. Because that's really what needs to sink in extremely deeply, is that reality, the map is not the territory. Our interpretation or mental representation or mental schema of reality is not reality itself. It's something we've constructed in our minds, and each person has a different mental construction of reality in their minds. And so to assume that your particular mental construction is the most accurate or optimal at any given time is really the height of hubris. And so we really want to free ourselves from this very human tendency to think in these terms. And yeah, so I think meditation, entheogens, yoga, just practicing mindfulness and spaciousness in day-to-day life, these are all really good methods. I also think reading the right books and listening to the right speakers who take a kind of non-dogmatic perspective and discuss how kind of what I'm talking about in terms of each person having their own kind of reality tunnel or their own reality map, and that the map is not the territory. So reading thinkers like Robert Anton Wilson, Friedrich Nietzsche, Terence McKenna, those would be three really good ones to start with as far as beginning to shift into this freer sense that that there are many ways to interpret any given situation or any given sliver of reality, and that staying in touch with this fact and ceasing to reactively force fit reality into your preconceived kind of framework or your most default framework is just not the most skillful or optimal way to proceed given our situation. And as you practice this and get better at it, it really does begin to feel like, wow, life did not have to be so hard all that time. I could just you sort of feel an increased ability to almost float and flow through situations, and you realize that situations that might have upset you previously or caused a fight or something, you're able to avoid the fight or the conflict or the bad feelings as a result of spaciousness and choosing to respond differently than your default reaction. And when you start to have a couple of those occurrences, then you start to realize what a superpower this is, and you realize, wow, I need to keep cultivating this because this is fucking incredibly powerful. So I think I will stop there for now. This has been a primer on spaciousness and a couple other things from the humble funny monkey Jordan Bates, chilling in the Amsterdam named locale on the Earth planet. It's a good little sector that I am occupying. I'm grateful to be here. Love this earth, love life. I love you. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time I see you. Peace and love.